And Sam went on, and there was a yellow light and fire within, and the evening meal was ready, and he was expected. And Rose drew him in, and set him in his chair, and put little Elanor upon his lap. He drew a deep breath. "Well, I'm back," he said. These are the famous final words in the story of The Lord of the Rings. Sam, the ever-true hero, returns home to his family at Bag End, after bidding farewell to his best friend at the Grey Havens. From here, Tolkien's book goes on to its appendices, consisting of high-level histories of famous realms, family trees, scraps of stories throughout history, notes on languages, and more. But this was not always Tolkien's intent, for he envisioned the story to continue, briefly giving us a glimpse into Sam's life many years later. The tale picks up in the 15th year of the Fourth Age, that is 15 years after Frodo sails into the West. And one evening in March, Master Samwise Gamgee was taking his ease by a fire in his study, and the children were all gathered about him, as was not at all unusual, though it was always supposed to be a special treat. He had been reading aloud, as was usual, from a big red book on a stand, and on a stool beside him sat Elanor. And she was a beautiful child, more fair-skinned than most hobbit maids, and more slender. And she was now running up into her teens, and there was Frodo lad on the hearthrug, in spite of his name as good a copy of Sam as you could wish. And Rose, Merry, and Pippin were sitting in chairs much too big for them. Tolkien goes on to list more of Sam and Rosie's children, Goldilocks, Ham, and Daisy, pointing out that like Bilbo passed the old toucan age, Sam was on track to pass him in the number of children, which of course he would with his 13th, Tom, born 6 years after this epilogue. The epilogue launches into a dialogue primarily between Sam and Elanor, his firstborn. She is questioning him about her namesake, the Elanor flowers of Lorien, and whether they grow there still. Sam says he doesn't see why they shouldn't, and after sharing that old Saruman would have called the plant ragtag and bobtail, he notes that Merry and Pippin have traveled outside the Shire more than once since the end of the war, for they now also sort of belong to the south. Then Sam's children, named after Meriadoc and Peregrine, chime in. "And haven't they grown big?" said Merry. "I wish I could grow big like Mr. Meriadoc of Buckland. He's the biggest hobbit there ever was. Bigger than Bandabras. Not bigger than Mr. Peregrine of Tuckborough," said Pippin. "And he's got hair that's almost golden. Is he Prince Peregrine away down in the Stone City, Dad?" "Well, he's never said so," said Sam. "But he's highly thought of, that I know. But now where were we getting to?" "Nowhere," said Frodo lad. "I want to hear about the spider again. I like the parts best where you come in, Dad." "But Dad, you were talking about Lorien," said Elanor, "and whether my flower still grows there." "I expect it does, Ellie dear. For as I was saying, Mr. Merry, he says that though the lady is gone, the elves still live there." "When can I go and see? I want to see elves, Dad. I want to see my own flower." "If you look in a glass, you'll see one that is sweeter," said Sam, "though I should not be telling you, for you'll find it out soon enough for yourself." Sam goes on to talk with his children about the elves sailing west. Elanor specifically asks about Galadriel's husband Celeborn, asking if he is sad, given his wife, Elrond, and others sailed away some 15 years ago, and in the years since. Sam says he expects Celeborn is sad, as all elves at this time are to a degree. We know that the time of the elves and the dominion of the Three Rings is over, and the world is left to decay as they linger. Sam goes on to say Celeborn lives among the trees, and is also happy in his elvish way, for they can afford to wait, and his time is not yet come to sail west and rejoin Galadriel. After Sam mentions Legolas, his son Frodo brings up Gimli, and in true child fashion, gives the uninterrupted thoughts of, "What's happened to Gimli? I liked him. Please, can I have an axe soon, Dad? Are there any orcs left? Sam patiently answers, saying there likely are orcs left if you know where to look. He tells of how, at this time, Gimli and his folk had helped the king in Minas Tirith, and had settled in the mountains west behind the city, and that Gimli visits the Glittering Caves every other year. This, of course, is a notable difference to what Tolkien eventually settled on, where Gimli founds the realm of the Glittering Caves, rather than just the occasional visit. Sam, of course, also tells Frodo Lad that there are no orcs in the Shire, and that he will have no need of an axe, whose purpose is chopping off heads. Elanor goes on to ask if Legolas continues to go visit Treebeard, and if the Ents ever found the Entwives, a question many fans can appreciate. For his part, Sam says he can't say whether Legolas, or Merry and Pippin for that matter, have seen the Ents since. And after Elanor admits to looking for Entwives whenever she is in the woods, Sam says that the missing Entwives is likely a trouble too old and deep for Hobbit folk to mend. Sam cuts off the questioning and his kids protest. In response, he threatens to tell the king about their misbehavior. He then shares a secret with his children concerned with putting off bedtime. The king will be visiting on the 25th of March, 1 week from today, and all of them have been invited by name. Sam pulls out a large scroll that had arrived in the mail 3 days before. Written in both Elvish and Common Tongue, it read, Elisar, Aragorn, Arathorn's son, the Elfstone, King of Gondor, and Lord of the Westlands, will approach the Bridge of Barad-dûn on the first day of spring, or in the Shire reckoning, the 25th day of March next, and desires there to greet all his friends. In especial, he desires to see Master Samwise, Mayor of the Shire, and Rose, his wife, and Elanor, Rose, Goldilocks, and Daisy, his daughters, and Frodo, Merry, and Pippin, and Hamfast, his sons. Elanor, who could read, notes that their names are different between the lists. Sam reveals to each their Elvish translations, Eleanor's being the same as it is an Elvish word. Frodo is Eorhail, Rose is Beryl, Merry is Ribben, Pippin is Cordolf, Goldilocks is Glorfiniel, Hamfast is Marthonk, and Daisy is Arien. Sam goes on to talk about their meeting with the king, and that the queen will also be there. He expects they will likely be invited up to the king's house by the lake. This, of course, is referencing Lake Evendim, north of the Shire, an important location not only for Aragorn's ancestors, but Galadriel and Celeborn as well. What I find so delightful about this epilogue is the glimpse it gives us into Hobbit Children. I can only imagine Tolkien drawing from his own experience as a father, being peppered with questions from Christopher about the color of Bilbo's door, helping to shape these interactions. Tolkien even brings up Hobbit Children in letter 144 to Naomi Mitchison. Hobbit Children were delightful, but I am afraid that the only glimpses of them in this book are found at the beginning of Volume 1. An epilogue giving a further glimpse, though of a rather exceptional family, has been so universally condemned that I shall not insert it. One must stop somewhere. And this is yet another reference to today's topic, where we find that delightful as Hobbit Children are, Tolkien decided one must stop somewhere, leading The Lord of the Rings to end where it does. Fortunately, Tolkien wasn't quite done trying this out after the first go-round, and Christopher would give us the multiple versions of the epilogue in the History of Middle-earth volume, Sauron Defeated. In the second full version of the epilogue, we find that the focus shifts from a scene of Sam with a handful of his kids to a more intimate scene between Sam and Elanor. Here, Sam is sitting at the well-worn desk in his study at Bag End, making notes for what would be the foundations of his contribution to the Red Book, the book started by Bilbo and continued by Frodo. Elanor is described as beautiful and seems to have been gifted a memory of elven grace. She finds her Sam dad with a page of questions and answers. He is merely making notes, answering the questions from Rose and their children. He notes that the last pages were left to him by Frodo, and he dare not write in them yet. He's still just making notes. Some additional notes we find in this version include things like, Sam hasn't heard whether Moria has been resettled, saying the prophecy of Durin may not be for their time, alluding to the later actions of Durin VII many years later. He also notes that there is still a lot of cleaning up to be done in dark places. He notes that Legolas went south with Gimli, bringing many of his own people from Greenwood and settling in Faramir's lands of Ithilien. Sam's son, Merry, had inquired about horses, and Sam notes that Shadowfax went on the White Ship with Gandalf. He goes on to say that Meriadoc Brandybuck says that in Rohan there are now more horses than ever, for they are no longer stolen by evil forces. Meriadoc also plans to bring a pony back from his present visit to Rohan for Sam's son, Merry. In an interesting tweak on the topic of the Entwives, Sam says he would also like for them to be found, but adds that perhaps the Entwives don't want to be found, and the Ents are tired of looking. As in the first version, Sam and Elanor have a conversation about her flower that still grows in Lorien, and Celeborn, who lives there still. They talk about the fading light of the elves, and that there are still those who will remain for the days to come. Elanor says how Celeborn must have known his granddaughter Arwen would stay, but that Galadriel would leave, noting that it must have been sad for him. Then she says how Frodo leaving must have been sad for her dad. Sam goes on to confide in Elanor a secret. Before he left, Frodo said that a time may come when Sam would take the same journey. I think maybe we haven't said farewell for good, but I can wait. I have learned that much from the elves at any rate. They are not so troubled about time, and so I think Celeborn is still happy among his trees, in an elvish way. His time hasn't come, and he isn't tired of his land yet. When he is tired, he can go. And when you're tired, you will go, Samdad. You will go to the havens with the elves. Then I shall go with you. I shall not part with you, like Arwen did with Elrond. Maybe, said Sam, kissing her gently. And maybe not. The choice of Luthien and Arwen comes to many, Elanor, or something like it. And it isn't wise to choose before the time. And now, my dearest, I think it's time even a lass of 15 springtimes should go to her bed. And I have words to say to Mother Rose. It is here before she goes to bed that Elanor asks about the letter from the king, which brings Sam to remark that her spying is repayment for the spying he once did on Frodo, as Frodo attempted to leave the Shire. He shares the letter with her, which notes now that they are to meet in 1 week on April 2nd, meaning this all now takes place on March 25th, the anniversary of the destruction of the One Ring. They discuss the proper decorum with the king and queen, and Sam once again references Lake Evendim, this time adding that Elladan and Elrohir, Arwen's brothers, will also be there. Elanor will indeed get her wish to see the elves. With that, Sam bids Elanor goodnight, and in both versions of the epilogue, Tolkien ends with the story of Sam and Rose. But before sharing that part of the tale, it's worth noting just how important Tolkien saw the story of both Sam and Rosie and Sam and Elanor. In letter 131 to Milton Waldman, Tolkien says, I think the simple rustic love of Sam and his Rosie, nowhere elaborated, is absolutely essential to the study of his, the chief hero's, character, and to the theme of the relation of ordinary life, breathing, eating, working, begetting, and quests, sacrifice, causes, and the longing for elves and sheer beauty. He later would say to Catherine Farrer in letter 173, I still feel the picture incomplete without something on Samwise and Elanor, but I could not devise anything that would not have destroyed the ending, more than the hints, possibly sufficient in the appendices. Finally, we conclude the epilogue with Sam and his Rosie outside Bag End. The stars were shining in a clear dark sky. It was the second day of the bright and cloudless spell that came every year to the Shire towards the end of March. and was every year welcomed and praised as something surprising for the season. All the children were now in bed. It was late, but here and there lights were still glimmering in Hobbiton, and in houses dotted about the night-folded countryside. Master Samwise stood at the door and looked away eastward. He drew Mistress Rose to him and set his arm about her. "March the 25th, he said. "This day 17 years ago, Rosewife. I didn't think I should ever see thee again, but I kept on hoping." "I never hoped at all, Sam," she said. "Not until that very day, and then suddenly I did. About noon it was, and I felt so glad that I began singing. And Mother said, 'Quiet, lass, there's ruffians about.' And I said, 'Let them come. Their time will soon be over. Sam's coming back.' And you came." "I did," said Sam. "To the most belovedest place in all the world, to my Rose and my garden." They went in, and Sam shut the door. But even as he did so, he heard suddenly, deep and unstilled, the sigh and murmur of the sea upon the shores of Middle-earth. Personally, I love this glimpse into Sam's life years after returning from the Grey Havens. The life of one who may be struggling to finish writing the Red Book, but one whose life is one and whole, full of things to enjoy and to be and to do. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil 19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, CCDC Red Team, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Swirled Traveler, Matthew Jeffrey, Viking Lord, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. And we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.